Hello. Hi, Elliot. Can you hear me? Hi, Elliot.
Can you see me?
No.
Okay. Do I need to do anything? I'm not a Zoom person.
Put your camera on so I can see you because you're going to be, some people won't be seen. It's just me and you that will be seen. You have a little camera in the right-hand corner, left-hand corner, depending on where you're standing. I've got to start in 2 minutes.
Unable to start a video. You can't start your video because the host has stopped it. It's your side.
No, I haven't stopped your video. I've stopped a recording at the moment. Me recording shouldn't make any difference to you. Have I turned? Right, at last we've got there. Hello, everybody from the Facebook page. This is Lottie here, and this is our live that we do once a month on a Tuesday, the last Tuesday of every month. And I come on here and I talk about things that are I find interesting about relationships, intimacy, and sex. I also have Facebook people who are on the Facebook page who regularly listen to the recording. So welcome. I hope you enjoy this live tonight. So just set the scene a little bit. Tonight we're going to be talking about men in different capacities. And I thought about this sort of part one, talk about men this month and talk about women next month. So part two. And I want to introduce to you a colleague and a lovely friend of mine, Elliot Burgess, and I'll get him to introduce himself in a moment. Because I thought to myself last night when I was thinking about coming on here and talking about men, I'm not a man. And I thought to myself, it would be great to have a man's perspective. So we're going to have a chat about what it's like to be a guy and bring different aspects of that into it. So Elliot, I wonder whether you just introduce yourself, what you do and what your interests are.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, and I appreciate you inviting me today. So my name is Elliot Burgess. I'm a classically trained client-centered therapist working out of the Alresford area. I've been qualified since 2012, I think it was, so just over a decade of working with young people and adults of all shapes and sizes. I would say since the pandemic, I've worked with more men than I ever have done before. Something that in our podcast that we provide, I think one of the drivers is that knowing the suicide rates for men in this day and age are skyrocketing. So I want to be supportive of our community, supportive of men, and help with as many kind of gentlemen of all kind of age and shapes and sizes as possible. So very glad to be here today. So thanks, Lottie, for inviting me. And you asked me what am I interested in? Motorbikes and family and kids. There you go. That just kind of covers that bit off.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I guess what I wanted to kick off and say is, what does it mean for a guy to be in a relationship? What is your, let's say, 3 things that you look for in a relationship? What would that be for you?
Are we talking about the perspective of me personally, or are we talking because I don't mind that. I think it's good to be open and honest and transparent, but is that also kind of my observations of client work as well?
Yeah, and I'm going to bring that into my sort of experience with guys in the therapy room. So yeah, both perspectives really. I think it's quite useful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think from a personal perspective, I think honesty, integrity, humor, and knowing that you're safe with your partner is something that I would certainly call green flags in relationships as far as I'm concerned. And I think that is echoed often in the client work that I see. If I think of some of the guys that come to us, they might have relationship issues and challenges. I think the thing that I notice more than anything else is that a lot of men, once married, once with their partners, long-term relationships, they appear to be committed wholly and solely to the relationship. Um, and perhaps the things that drew them to their partners gets lost, perhaps. It seems like a common thread. And when you delve a little deeper, perhaps sometimes it's more that they've lost themselves as opposed to kind of lost their partner.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess you mentioned safety there. When we talk about the relationship creed, which is all to do with Tony Robbins, safety is the number one aspect of being in a relationship, to be vulnerable. From a guy's point of view, what's it like? Or from a client point of view that you've experienced, that vulnerability is quite hard to pin down. Do you like to be vulnerable, or does it feel sometimes that you don't want to be? Is it safe enough to be vulnerable?
That is a huge question.
Mm,
I think some of the experiences I've had, let's just focus on client work for a second.
yeah.
But I think that's a really valuable point. In my experience, once a guy has been betrayed,
Mm,
maybe not the right words, but certainly if they've been vulnerable and they've been vilified, or they have been, what's the word I'm thinking of? Betrayed.
mhm,
It's usually a one-way street from that point onwards. A guy will hunker down and become more insular and
mm,
certainly won't share anything from that point onwards. I think, actually you and I talked about this a little while ago, as young men, or young boys, what are we told to do? Pull our socks up, be
mm,
brave,
mm.
be courageous. But then when you hit your teens, that's toxic. So you can't be that way. So you can't act that way, and you can't be male. You've got to be kind of more accommodating and pleasing. And I don't think that suits the masculine energy that's innate in most men. It probably doesn't answer your question, but that's kind of the direction I was going.
Yeah, well, it's still a safety aspect. Can I share, and will that make me too vulnerable to then take me to a place of maybe shame or humiliation? So you're absolutely correct. It's a huge question that I'm
Yeah.
throwing them all.
Where should we go with it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so when the whole point of this, I always want to call it a podcast, but it's not, it's a live, is talking about love and affection. So I do believe that actually men and women are very similar. I do think that actually we want the same as them. So sometimes why does it get confused, I wonder, with that sort of like communication between each other? Do you think that's because of the masculine side of protector and all that hiding the feelings, and the woman wants the warmth and the safety? But I feel like they both want both, actually.
They they definitely want the same thing, but how is it mustered up? How is it created? Where does it evolve from?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. We do essentially want the same things, but from a male, female, masculine, feminine perspective, how we communicate that can also be entirely different.
Yeah.
There's and I know we had a chat earlier on the day about preparing for this live, and I hope I'm not going to steal your thunder, so apologies in advance. But you were talking about what does love mean for men.
Hmm.
You made a point about sex being important,
Hmm.
and I think there's an element of sex can fast track the feeling of love, but it doesn't give any satisfaction as far as relationship is concerned. They are two totally different things.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's probably communicated well with men in this day and age. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I was listening to Esther Perel, and she was talking about you can have a lot of sex and it mean very little. But actually, what we're looking for is the eroticism of aliveness, to have quality sex, to be engaged, to be present, to be there. And for me, there's something about that to actually think about. It's not about the quantity that you might have with your partner, because when there's none of it going on at all, it's like oxygen. You need it more than ever, and that causes a real angst within the relationship. But wouldn't it be better to have really good sex less?
Yeah, quality over quantity.
Yeah, Yeah, but I think this she was talking about, the usual way of doing it, the toys that you always use. There's no aliveness in it. And I talk to my clients about arousal. Your arousal circuits will set themselves at a certain pace if you do the same thing. Whereas actually, if you're able to change it up, bring some novelty in, a bit of kink, maybe a bit of fetish even, to actually change that degree of arousal, it
So
gives.
this is interesting. I'm going to challenge that for a second because I'm going to bring myself into the fold.
Okay.
And if a partner were to say, "I want to be kinky. I want you to tie me up, or I want you to put a gag on me," I think that is the most vulgar thing I can think of. That's not what I would want.
No, no,
And
for
it's
for you in your relationship.
yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think and maybe, well, we need to differentiate between sex and intimacy, don't we? Because I think they on the surface might seem the same thing. And do we even allow ourselves to be intimate if we don't really know what it actually means? And I think you and I have spoken about this before. Intimacy for me is vulnerability, but going back to what you said at the beginning of the stream, vulnerability and safety. You've got to have a safe environment to be vulnerable. You can't be betrayed. You can't have it thrown back in your face, or shamed in any way, because that opportunity is then tainted. It's gone.
I am going to take you back to the kink for just a minute. And I tell you why, because the way that you said it, and we're not talking about women this week, we're talking about men. If you felt that way, which you do, how would you have a discussion with your partner that didn't shame her? Because that
Uh,
might be
I mean,
something
that's a
that's
huge fine line, isn't it?
huge.
Yeah, huge
Absolutely.
fine line. And I think yeah, it's about empathy and respect for your partner.
Hmm.
If there's also a very careful dance that you might need to encourage, which is, you don't need to do those things to make me happy, because that's what's not important for me.
Hmm.
Being intimate, close, and in a safe environment, all of those, anything seen as kink,
Hmm.
it can embellish a relationship, but it's not the be all and end all. It's certainly not the instigator of what a healthy relationship is. It's just, you probably can articulate this better than me, but it adds a value, but it's not the most important thing, I would have thought.
It's not the most important, but I guess I'm looking again for the aliveness. If we're doing the same thing all the time and someone switches off because it's not what they want, then the aliveness would be looking at, I call it the kink list, the same as Esther. What is it that we can put on the kink list? And it should be called the excitement list, because it doesn't have to be kinky. It just has to be different to set the arousal circuit up again on a different way.
I'm hearing the conflict in between us now, because I'm realizing that if I was in a long-term relationship, I would never get bored. I
Right.
would never get bored of what's perceived as kind of normal.
Right.
I
Okay.
see it as kind of oxygen. I see it as kind of food. It's
Mm.
it's
I
it's
love that.
it's the really important part of it. Yeah, this is our thing.
Mm.
And the thought of being bored of it is such a bizarre concept,
Mm.
because I hold it in such high regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is an intimacy between us. There is an opportunity for us to be close and together. I I do not want this to be, and I know it's different for other people, and there's very different types of um, fetish and interests and all those things. But I don't want it to define our relationship. It's really important, but it's the icing on the cake, and it doesn't have to be about that. But let's not devalue it by bring, bringing a third party in that can be powered by batteries or a person.
Mm. Okay, so there is a thing called the dance of intimacy, and I want us to talk about intimacy because you just mentioned it. I think intimacy is the warmth that we lead up to have sex. So when we talk about one orgasm to the next, it's about being kind, it's about being attentive and present and touching and feeling. And so not that sort of like process where you're always on it for sex, but actually you're thinking, I want to be close, I want to stay close. all the time, not all the time as in codependency, but just enough to be able to stay linked to each other. So I think that's what intimacy is.
Okay, so we're talking about stuff from a male-female perspective. I see intimacy as an opportunity for men to be vulnerable without being punished.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can find a partner where you can be truly yourself and open and evolve, you can still be masculine, you can still be courageous in the daytime and fight the world and, you know, beat the bear over the head and bring the meat home in the evening, but to be snuggled up to your partner and have that vulnerability where you're, I guess it's almost a maternal thing, kind of
Mm.
looked after, cared for,
Mm.
accepted,
Yeah.
respected, probably more than anything else. I think that's probably one of the biggest driving factors. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that's not for all men, but certainly the guys that I work with, I think they're not as um gregarious and, you know, it's all about sex. They sometimes they're just trying to figure out, what the hell does sex mean? How does it fit into our relationship?
Yeah.
How does that work in a compassionate setting? Does it make me weak? Does it make me strong? What do I do? What's kind of, it almost feels like sometimes there's a lot of practicing of terminology and
Mm.
setting the scene and being a particular way that they've not had to be before.
Mm. And do you feel the same as I do for my clients, is that sometimes, you know, you use the word punishment. So there are lots of relationships at the moment where sex is just not on the table at all. Does it feel like a punishment if that happens? I don't know whether you've experienced that with clients or yourself, but what would it feel like if your partner gave up on sex and goes, I don't want to have sex anymore? What would that be like for you to not be able to show that affection?
I think it falls into two categories. There's a shame there, there's a sadness, and there's certainly is it punishment? I'm thinking about this as we're
Hmm.
chatting. The punishment does sound hard, but sometimes, what do we want? We want to feel loved. We want to be accepted. We want compassion. We want to feel trusted. We want to feel like we've got a partner. And to take something that can be weaponized
Mm.
as, you just want me for sex. Well, you can't say yes to that because it's not, but it is. And I'm talking from a client perspective. You know, how do I articulate that I want sex, but I, hang on a minute, I don't want sex because that's not but I can't articulate it. Well, actually, you know, then into that fold, certainly the work I do is, well, maybe sex is just kind of the surface level action that establishes that there is something else more important behind what sex brings. It brings you the intimacy, it brings you the connection, it brings you skin to skin, it brings you safety. Probably what you're saying are all very similar
Mm.
things that women want. I'm guessing, you know, that's the whole purpose of us chatting today. But you know, perhaps that's the similarities, perhaps.
Yeah, I do think there are similarities. It's almost like, you know, men and women are very, very different. And I think actually we are very, very similar. I just want to talk about Harville Hendrix, the loved up stage and everything, because I think it's quite
What did you
poignant.
call that? Harv? I did.
Harville.
My limited understanding. Can you explain what that is, please?
Harville Hendrix is a person. His ex-wife is Helen Hunt, and they were the ones who put together all about relationships. They've got fantastic books out there. But limerence is the first thing that happens when you're in a relationship. So you meet
Right.
someone, you have that real sort of obsession, possession, feeling like you don't want to be away from them, waiting for their every call. And it's normal. People don't actually know. They think they're in love, but actually it's limerence. And limerence is supposed to wane off slightly towards that bit where you're starting to differentiate and become an eye and go, is this the person I want to spend even more time with? And this is the bit where we start to fear that the other person's switching off from us, but actually they might be working out whether you are for us. Okay, so the limerence goes along and
It's
it's really
multifaceted though, isn't it? There's a lot going on in that, in what you call the tailing off of limerence.
yeah, absolutely. So that part of it, and sometimes one person tails off quicker than the other person. So you got somebody really heartfelt and there, and the other person's going, okay, whatever. So they're starting to get that fearful feeling of going, oh no, this is going to end. And they become more clingy. But what I'm looking at here is when we choose to somebody, we actually go, yeah, I am going to make this investment. Okay. What we do is we go into the power struggle. And this is what I'm finding in my therapy session. I don't know whether you are. The power struggle between a relationship is that actually they don't come out of the power struggle. They stay in it. So there's not a relief or a vacation or a parole. You're coming out for a while to have a bit of downtime. It just stays in this like river running under the relationship completely, whilst all the other stuff's going on around, family and kids and everything. But you never forget it. Like there's lack of sex or lack of communication or lack of intimacy. It's always like a river running right the way through.
Is that essentially a bit of a complacency coming in where we're not taking responsibility for our part to play in the choice in the relationship?
Ooh. Yeah, well, I see the power struggle as a conflict. So conflict is trying to have some growth. But obviously what you're saying is, am I taking responsibility for the part that I'm playing? Because if you're not, where could be growth?
Yeah, because what came up for me as you explained it, I was captivated, and I was in, I was there, but I was thinking, where's my accountability? Because the relationship isn't just an I, is it? It's a we. So
Yeah.
ultimately, if I look after, I hope I don't go off tangent here, to be the very best parent I can be, I don't have to put my kids first. I've got to put me first. And that's really important. And that's something that I say in client work. There's as much as you want to fix your relationship, it will not work until you're in a good space and place, when you're comfortable and capable and able. And I think that's what came up for me when you were chatting about the kind of that concept of that river underneath. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's like we can feel like we are out of control when actually we're not. It's all down to communication, isn't it? It's kind of, here's my wants, here's my needs. And if our partner can't articulate that, well, then help them to the best of our abilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's what, I don't know, maybe that's the purpose of having people in, that do the work that you do. We might get to the point where we're kind of stuck and we just need that third party to help us unpick all this crap.
Well, I think that's what is happening for me in my therapy session, is men are having that attunement, that connection, that emotional connection, they're finding really difficult. Perfunctory, practical, doing jobs, having a purpose, being there, absolutely spot on. But when it comes, if you've been in a longer relationship, people are looking for an emotional connection. Are you the person who's actually going to be there when I'm not well, or I'm whatever? And I'm finding that the emotional connection, there's a deficit in it. Whether they've spent so much time bringing up the children, they've forgotten about each other, they've sort of gone like that. To bring them back to that can be very, very difficult.
Haven't you actually just outlined it a sentence ago? They lose themselves. Do you think that is the common denominator?
Well, I think if you lean into your relationship so much that it's all about them, then you can end up finding that you end up years later going, I actually don't know who I am, or my vision of myself was.
So let's play devil's advocate for a second. If that's the case, then you can lose yourself.
Yeah.
That's without question. I know I've got my own experiences where I've lost myself and tried to put other people first. It doesn't work. But there could also be a kind of not a sinister, but a kind of an unhealthy attribute where contempt kicks in, surely, because you've not you, but my partner has crippled me or taken away my identity, or I've been sold something and it's not what I expected. So contempt is probably another thing that kicks in, which is an incredibly unhealthy dialogue.
Well, I think the second part of that, which is what they've taken from me, but I think when we say they made me feel like, you don't have, if you're differentiated enough and you're an I, and somebody says something to you in a relationship, you don't have to own it, because a lot of it can be projection. And I wonder where men sit with that, where, you know, when a woman or your partner is saying to you, it's all your fault, you don't take responsibility, you don't do enough. Where does a guy go with that?
This is hard for me, and I'll tell you the reason why, because it's the common thread when I see incredibly strong, capable, and able men fall apart.
Right.
That lack of identity, that lack of relationship, and feeling that it's their fault
Mm.
and they are powerless to, it maybe in their day job they feel compelled because they're capable, but they come back to their relationships and got both hands tied behind their back. And
Mm.
the absolute despair that I experience is it's hard to see. It's
Mm.
hard to experience. Experience probably the better word. It is hard
Well,
to
I guess you're
experience.
witnessing their pain, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Mm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what is it like for a guy? Because from a woman's perspective, I think men are quite raw, and I mean this in a really
Well, raw and emotional. This is what I
yeah.
think. This is one thing that if I could share anything with beautiful human beings, male or female, is knowing that both sexes experience these same emotions. Just because one is more emotional and one is more um, withdrawn doesn't mean the emotions aren't there at all. Far from it.
Yeah.
Polar ends. I
Yeah.
can't stress that enough.
So we've got raw, okay, and then we've got emotions, and then we add more testosterone, and then we add more sex. Where does that take a guy? Because I feel like children, you know, stick up for yourself, hit somebody if they hit somebody. As a teenager, you know, stop being lazing about and do, you know, get out there and do this, that, and the other. There's
Yeah.
this push to be strong all the time. Then when you get to an adult, you get to a man, it's like, can you calm yourself down a little bit, please? Could
Well,
you see?
you're not allowed to do it. Certainly in this, I'll try and keep this very succinct. But with the work with younger men that I do now, social media and this toxic masculinity theme that is running riot because it's a really popular algorithm is not doing young men any good at all, because they effectively can't be men, not toxic, just men with masculine traits.
Hmm.
So I think that's another level, that's kind of another layer that I think infiltrates younger men today probably more than anything else.
Yeah, and when we think about all the groups that are starting up, one, you know, or have been going for a long time, the American ones and the one in England, Mankind and everything, you can see why the group dynamics works, because men are holding all those feelings in.
Do you know what has come up for me?
Oh.
Men need men.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Men need men because essentially we don't really have a platform for that vulnerability at the risk of getting hurt.
Mm.
We need to wrap it. Think about the army. We need to wrap it up in camaraderie. You're a rugby player, so you can be kicked, pushed, have a beer thrown over your head, punched on the shoulder. That's intimacy.
Yeah.
As bizarre as that sounds, those are those intimate moments where man can go, I was understood and I was appreciated and I was respected and I was a bit of a lad and I was able to air my view or show that camaraderie. And then someone punches on the shoulder and they go, love you.
Yeah.
That's all you needed. Just
Yeah.
to know that you're understood and you're a part of a community, a clan, your tribe. Maybe that's why men choose, football and rugby and other sports, because they feel a part of something, because we're just not designed the same way as women, perhaps, to chat about our feelings. We just do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. But I agree with you, that raw and that emotional part of you is totally there, but whether it's seen or not is another thing.
And I think it's unhealthy when we repress it. And
Mm.
I may not be able to articulate this in the way that I would hope, but it's sharing secondhand information from, Jordan Peterson. We went to see him at the O2 in London, but he talks about a healthy man is a monster, but then he learns how to control it.
Wow.
And I think I've heard that expression a few times. And the more work that I do with men, how they restrict themselves, how they're made to feel guilty or shamed for very normal behaviors and feelings. I think if we don't find an outlet, or we don't find a way to articulate ourselves, or find a comfort in the way we actually are and who we are, I think it's a dangerous place to be. So I think Jordan Peterson's outline, to be a monster and learn how to tame it, resonates with a lot of men, because there's an inner rage that should not be, absolutely should not be caged. It should be used accordingly for the protection of our families, our communities, someone on the rugby pitch, whatever it might be. We can't suppress it and ignore it, because that, well, with even therapy, if we just keep things locked up inside, it's a slippery slope.
It is, and I suppose what we're looking at there is emotional regulation, isn't it? As much as we'd like all that rage to come out in a really solid way, we have to find a way to actually manage it or master it.
Absolutely. And if you, again, it kind of goes back to maybe the younger generation of men today. We're not allowed to show any form of masculinity, or certainly the experiences that I've had. And it seems to be, like I said earlier, a popular algorithm, which I don't think is doing our culture any good.
Yeah. One question I've got is, do men find confident women sexy?
Yes and no.
Go.
There you go. Next question. No, I'm joking. the I'll use my own. This is a perfect example. You are confident, and I find that really sexy. Now, I don't mean that in a derogative way, but from an empowered woman perspective, you've got your drive, you've got your passion, you're using all your tools in your armory, you're a brilliant human being to be around. And so I applaud what you do, and I think I would support 110% your success. So that's a really positive thing. I think we get very, very, very confused. And again, I'm going to go back to the younger generation just because I see so much of it. I think there is this empowerment of being, an empowered woman. I can do my own thing. And there's a vulgarity to, I don't need a man. That's not attractive, because I know from a man's perspective, and the guys that come to me, they need their partners, they need women, they need relationships with their daughters. They are designed to look after the people that they love and care about. And I don't think that, how do I word this? I think it is just as important from a woman's or female's perspective, or a feminine perspective. There's nothing wrong with wanting a man, but when we replace relationship with, I'm going to kill it in the workplace and I'm going to be a boss bitch, I don't think that's something that men find attractive. But confident, still feminine, owning their own business, absolutely powerhouse in City of London, doing a particular job or something, that's attractive. But not forgetting that the feminine is the most attractive and the most secure thing that a man could need or even desire.
Okay, so two perspectives on that then. Yeah. What do you feel about when Esther says we need enough separation to get closeness? What does that mean to a guy?
Interestingly enough, we've done a couple of podcasts recently, and one of the things that I've noticed is that men still need to do manly stuff. And maybe when they get invested in partnership, relationship, or marriage, maybe they go into losing themselves a little bit. They go into serving mode, and they forget some of their masculine attributes. Might be a sport, it might be going out once a week for a beer, or
Motorbikes.
You read my mind, didn't you? Yeah, motorbikes, pretending that you're all rah, rah, rah and invincible, even if it's a split second. And I think the separation side of it, as you said, from Esther, who is amazing, as you well know, I think the separation is important, but it's how you define that separation. What are you doing in that separation? Is it the self-care, or are you just kind of twiddling your thumbs waiting for your partner to allow you back in the house tomorrow? It doesn't, that doesn't feel healthy. That feels like you've lost yourself.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's the perspective of somebody being kicked out. I think it's that part of you that actually, if you give enough separation, you'll want to be closer because you're actually doing activities outside of each other to bring back to the relationship and to share them. It's not, I look at exits. If there's too many exits, it means you're trying to get away. Activities are very, very different.
I'm about to embarrass myself, so I'm going to caveat this.
Okay, that's a good idea if you're going to embarrass yourself.
It's something I heard about. I can't remember. It's a shame we're not doing this a podcast, because I'll put this up on the screen as a description so I can follow up with the bit that I've forgotten. But there is a principle in Japan
Right.
where we might have an object like a painting or an art piece or a sculpture or whatever it might be. But what they do is none of it is on display. And the purpose is that when important people come to visit, or family, you go to this special shelving on your living room wall. You come out with your box and you open your box and you show something of importance, and everyone marvels at this beautiful piece of art, and you put it back in the box, because there's that perception that if you see too much of it, then it kind of ruins it, it wastes it. You use too much of that positive energy. I
Mm.
love that. And it kind of relates to what you were saying about
Yeah.
spending too much time with your partner, appreciating them for their beauty,
Mm.
not because they can't pick up the toilet roll off the floor in the bathroom, and then that becoming some kind of compelling reason to nag them.
Yeah.
It's appreciating that they are an individual as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Where did you, I'm ready to find out where you found that from. That's so
No, I'm
lovely.
not going to tell you. It's mine now.
Um, what about sex and men? Let's talk about that. Intimacy, sex and men. Okay. I talked briefly just a minute ago about Esther talking about the aliveness and the opportunity for a more quality and diverse relationship if you choose to. What do you think about imagination instead of porn?
Oh,
It feels like it's a
here's a
taxing.
hand grenade. Good luck.
Right.
Mic drop. Right. Can we break that down? So what do you mean by imagination and porn? And then I'll do my best to answer what I think I know from working with men that have had either porn addictions, or issues around porn, infidelity, that kind of thing. I'll try and be as succinct as I can.
Yeah, okay. So let's separate. Porn addiction is very much from porn use. Okay.
Okay.
You separate that out. But actually, I get a lot of couples and the women are just like, no porn ever. And I
Hmm.
feel like that's a really difficult thing to say to a guy and say, I had a couple who signed a contract and she said never, ever, ever. And he watched it once and they were finished. So it feels like a massive ask to do that. And I guess sometimes when couples come in here and the porn use has got quite a lot because there's no sex going on, I do some imagination work, and I just wonder whether it's something you've ever talked to men about, or whether the rawness of why they use the porn. We know why, and what you think about that.
Well, that's interesting, because you say, oh, that porn use, and we all know why. I would question that.
Good.
You know,
Okay, question that for me.
yeah, because that's quite a profound statement. We all know why. Okay, why? Why do men use porn? Because I think there is so much of an assumption made around porn use. And I think it's multifaceted. I think it has a number of layers to it. And we can't generalize men
Okay.
across all of those spectrums.
Okay, give me a little bit more. What do you mean by that? What's the facet? What's the diamond? That's lots of things within that. Why would they watch it?
Here's kind of one example.
Mm.
If you don't know what intimacy is,
Yeah.
and you don't know what affection is, but they're associated to sex, then sex gives the illusion of intimacy and safety and connection. If you then have sex, but it doesn't leave you fulfilled, it didn't give you that safety, it didn't give you that connection, but sorry to be crude, but you know, once you finish the act, there's that whole, and you probably know the different bodily functions, kind of the chemicals that are released and the endorphins and dopamine and all those things. There is that kind of settling period afterwards. It might mimic the feelings of connection with that person.
Right.
And, you know, and I've heard men talk about this on a number of occasions where they might have a one-night stand, and depending on how they feel at the end of the act, they can either be repelled afterwards and go like, I'm not seeing that girl ever again, or this is the one I'm going to marry.
Right.
And so I think we get confused about what intimacy, safety, relationship is. And we think, men think, because there's that feeling associated to it, that sex has kind of given them that feeling, when actually there's so much more depth to it. We just haven't, probably more of an educational thing.
Yeah, I can really hear that. The list of things, of reasons why men would either do one night stands or watch porn is multifaceted.
Yeah.
And I never thought it was for one thing, but you've made me really think about the reasons for, because when we think about sex education in general, there isn't any. And men are going
Well,
into
but the biological side of it, but not the relationship.
not really. They separate them in the school, which is really weird to me. They should keep them all together so they could both hear all of it. Whether they've changed that now, I don't know. I haven't been in the school for a long time. However, what we're trying to think about is the education then, and how they go on to be intimate with another person, because it is almost like practice. Do you know when you first start what to do, how to do it, what the person wants? Do you have a conversation with that person in the very beginning? When you're very young, probably not.
No, you don't. I don't think you have the capability. I don't think you have the broad-mindedness either. Do you know what? It's I'm gonna question myself now. I'm gonna throw myself under the bus. If I was in a committed, caring, this is probably the important bit, safe relationship, where I was able to say exactly how I feel without the fear of upsetting or concerning my partner, would I use porn in a particular setting? And I can see instances where actually that would, yeah, I can see that being fun, or we got an idea, or it could be something about exploration, or it might be something that she likes, you know. All of those things make sense. But that has to be, the prerequisite of that needs to be firm foundation, healthy, safe relationship where you feel trusted and respected. And I think that needs to be from both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I don't think that's just a male want.
So you were talking about couples and like a man, you know, so for the partner, for the lady, it was, you know, absolutely no porn. He watched porn once on a whatever device, and that was it, they're done. In your experience, has porn helped couples? Can it reinvigorate? Can it help either one because of erectile dysfunction, or you know, or whatever else condition or experience or trauma that someone might have experienced in an unhealthy setting?
Well, I think it has its place, but obviously that can be controversial when I've got a couple in the room and the wife doesn't agree with any of it at all, and the partner has been watching it, or she knows he's been watching it and she doesn't like some women. I've been in many situations where women are like, you shouldn't say this and that, but I still think it has a place. Obviously watching certain porn, so there are levels of porn, and I always check out with guys what they're watching. But also I what your question to me was, yes, it can help. So when I've had situations where there isn't anything happening and they choose something together, so men wouldn't choose what they normally would watch. They're choosing something together that they would feel that they would get arousal from. Because sometimes the arousal's gone from both partners, and sometimes porn can really help bring that back online. But they've got to be able to choose something that arouses them both. Not, it's a bit like somebody's experienced in finding stuff and the other person's never really done it. We don't want to watch that person's stuff because that would be his arousal or her arousal. Got to find something new that connects them differently.
In your, I'm asking you questions now, sorry. In your experience, I know from just what we're listening to podcasts really, and it's some really profound human beings that have got experience in this field as well as yourself. But the long-term use of porn, what can that, I think I see what it does for men, and it's not good. It really isn't good. What's your experience?
Well, there's two schools of thought here, isn't there? And I can't go into it completely detail, but there's one school of thought that actually there is an addictive process to it. And another school of thought is actually it's a compulsivity that can be given up easily. So there's two lines of inquiry there. But to me, if something is taking over your life, you need to actually masturbate often, and then that might be at work where you could get a sack from your job. And this is men and women, not just men. If it impacts your life so much, then it is a problem. Anything that impacts your life on an addictive basis will be a problem. And that's when you seek therapy, when you seek help.
This is probably this is something that I have toyed with the concept before, and I guess we're encroaching on the same kind of content. I'll cut to the chase. If you think about a couple that have sex every day, they don't have a problem, and if they love it and they're both consenting adults, there is no issue whatsoever. But if the one partner says it's too much, it's becoming a problem, it then becomes a problem, although the sex drive of one individual hasn't differed, but now they've got that shame and that kind of overarching persecution that they're the one with the problem. So,
but if we remember that actually from limerence to power struggle, do I want to be with that person? The sex is going to change anyway. And that really floors somebody sometimes. They go, why is it gone? And it's because you can't keep up that limerence stage forever. It's up to sort of 2 years. It can be some shorter for some people. You can't keep up. So we've got to find a level of where you're both going to say, it's not a compromise from each other. It's negotiating what that level will be. But also sometimes it's not even, we have it twice a week. Actually connect with your feelings. Sex is about looking at your partner sometimes and thinking, oh, feel a bit horny. Actually, I'm going to go and see if there's, anything that they want from me. So it's a feeling. We don't always want to contrive sex that we have it once a month and on a Tuesday or on your birthday or Christmas or whatever it might be. We need to actually go with our responses as well.
I think there's got to be some spontaneity and appreciation for each other's growth and movement and ebb and flow, and appreciation and respect for them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I want men to be rejected carefully. I want them to, I so do, because actually the dismissive.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Let's just sit with that. Reject them carefully. That's a huge thing. Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because it just shames them, and they have a dialogue in their head about we can end up not liking our partner. We have resentment because it's not that the fact that they haven't had sex, that's part of it. It's the way they were dismissed. And our family of origin is very much playing out in every single relationship that I meet up with. Things that you feel that you're abandoned or rejected or dismissed or not heard or not seen, it's still there in our relationships now. And when somebody goes get off or go away or not now, and the word I do not tolerate is sex pest. I don't like that at all. I don't want to vilify men at all. Like we've said already, it's like oxygen. If you don't get the oxygen, you will keep on and on and on because you can't breathe. there needs to be a discussion of why you've shut down. You know, my contract, friendship, intimacy, and sex, it's a contract. And somebody's gone, yeah, I'm not doing that with you anymore. The
Yeah.
contract's been broken. So where does this person go?
But and I know it sounds awful, but it's kind of, well, that's what I bought into. That's what we agreed. And now all of that's something that's so important to me, rightly or wrongly, if they just see it as just sex, which is kind of, you know, perhaps there's some education there and some growth and some inner work and some eye work that needs to be done. But essentially to take that away when, even though they might not be able to articulate it, it's so important to them, can be crucifying.
But I think men will go in different directions to try and, you know, be the driver of, you know, is it possible? Is it possible? If it's possible. So they're trying to do intimacy to get the warmth to go to sex. But in the end, they come into the therapy and they go, I just want sex. And that's not sexy. Women will never apply themselves to wanting with their partner.
Why not?
No, not when they're rowing so much, definitely.
No, they're completely out of the equation.
Well, I don't know. You can have angry sex. That's another thing as well. But it depends how you feel after it, not during.
Oh, I can't think of anything worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on from that,
Yeah.
what we need to do is more dialogue and say, right, okay, why have you shut down? There'd be reasons why people shut down. It's not because they're going, I don't like you. There might be a desire or arousal issue, but we can talk about that.
Well, I think about some of the guys that I work with and conversations that would have worked really well for them in similar settings is, I love you, I fancy you, can I do it right now? Let's wait till tomorrow. I'm all yours, just not tonight, sweetheart. Big hug, big kiss, you know, and just having that I've got your back, but I personally can't do it tonight. And it's got nothing to do. You are my man. You are important to me. Never, ever, ever lose that. Don't ever, you know. So I think that type of dialogue can land very, very differently. Almost kind of like, she can't deal with me tonight. You know, I'm joking, but do you get my point? It's appeasing that kind of masculine nature where he's not been embarrassed, shamed. I think it's shame, isn't it? The shame is the biggest killer for men.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got about 9 minutes left. What's your takeaway from tonight, do you think? What will you take away?
I think healthy dialogue around our needs and wants and taking responsibility. Let me backtrack a bit. Sex isn't what men think it is, in my experience. It's very much a natural bodily function for some, but I often think that where it gets mistaken is that it is affection, it is attention, it is that glue that holds a relationship together, without even having the opportunity to explore how much more it is. And the reason why it's so important, because it is that the relationship is a part of that relationship glue that holds a intimate relationship together in between two trusting partners. And I think I think some of the comments you made about porn or porn addiction, or, you know, we have to go very careful not to vilify somebody when we don't know why they might be doing something, or why they might be investing something, or what are they missing? Why are they doing it? What is missing in the world? What area in their life, what childhood experience of trauma led to this fast track for immediate gratification? Because I guarantee you, men don't feel good about immediate gratification, but when you don't know any other way of finding it, you kind of, I guess that's where the addiction side comes from.
Can do. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm going to take away that part when you're explaining porn as well, that it's multifaceted. There's much more to it. And one thing that come up for me then is about self-soothing. So if there's in the either relationship or family of origin, this can be sex is the highest energy that we have, and it can be something of a way of self-soothing. So you're absolutely right. There's lots of things that you've just reminded me of, but also curiosity. Always stay curious with your partner and ask them questions and want to listen to them, because if there's an angst within the relationship, then it needs to be talked about. This has been really interesting, Elliot. I really appreciate you being here. because I think being here on my own, obviously with another guest here, talking about men would have been quite difficult. And I really appreciate like organizations like Mankind and all the other ones. Oh, thank
Men,
you.
men's
Um,
shed.
yeah, Men's Shed and all that. You know, I'm a little bit jealous that I can't go, if I'm honest. I really want to be there. But I'm just so grateful that they're there, because the first thing that you said was about men not being here. They choose not to be here for whatever reason that is. And
Here's a, here's
and
a
it,
stat. Here's a stat that's probably worth just kind of sitting with. One, the age of 40 to 45, I think suicide men are 4 times that of women. And
right.
each man that commits suicide, that's somebody's son. That's
Absolutely.
somebody's son that can't deal with being here anymore. And it might be over some of the things that we've talked about today that they just can't deal with anymore. The rejection, you talked about rejection. It might be that
Yeah.
years and years and years of rejection and not thinking they can ever get compassion, love, or acceptance. And that for me, that hurts. That really strikes a chord with me. And it's, I guess that's kind of the reason why I want to continue doing what I do.
Yeah. So what comes up for me is keeping men safe and giving them a place and a platform to talk.
Yeah. Men need men. As I
Mm.
said that earlier, I kind of reminded myself how important that is.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. It's been delightful talking to you as always. And I will see you again real soon. And thank you, Kerry, for being here in your heart. Really appreciate it. And this will go out on the live in the next couple of days. So I hope anybody that's on the Facebook page enjoys it too. Thank you.
Thanks, Lottie. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.